Honored to be here with you. I'm so excited because it's important to understand how we connected. The theme of kind of resetting your year at the end of the year, thinking about 2026 in different themes. And one of the things that stood out about you when we immediately connected, one, you're a Sagittarius, upcoming birthday this weekend. Two, your themes and focus as it relates to women of color, the myth of success, the achievement gap. Three, you are a veteran, which I think is incredible. And there's so much storytelling and leadership trends that I think we'd, be remiss to not address, particularly in the environment today. And four, when I approached you about talking about a book, you started thinking about all these other things bucket list and how we plan our lives. And I just thought that was perfect because it's such a nice way to blend all the different facets of who you are in a way that is quite unique. So I'm so happy that you're here today. And the way I structure the conversation is we'll go over a few key themes as it relates to intentions for the year, thinking about bucket lists, how different types of groups do that. What does it mean in terms of thinking about who you are and your identity and legacy and formation around that, what it was like to create your book, and also even teaching because you're teaching a course at NYU. No shade to NYU because we love Kellogg. And I just wanted to cover it all. So how does that sound?
Sounds great, Ruth. Thank you so much for having me, everyone.
Of course. Okay, so it's December, it's holiday season, the Rockefeller tree just went up. We're thinking about the holiday season as a time of reflection, but also kind of regeneration for intentions. And so, because we're in that mode, I was curious what's something that you're thinking about based on 2025 and how you want to change it for 2026.
So, my word for intention closing out 2025 and then looking towards 2026, it
Mhm.
actually came as a surprise. During Indigenous Peoples Day, I have a good friend who was leading this beautiful ceremony. We had sage and like lemongrass. It was so beautiful. And he said, with this medicine, what's your
Mhm.
intention? And the word that came up to me was self-love. And it was really surprising because I thought, well, there's going to be this service or there's going to be like amplification of impact. And to come back to self love has been very moving for me because it honestly starts here, right? If we can't love
Right.
ourselves, then it's hard to love others. And then we end up with this cycle of like, how can I prove to others that I'm worthy when I
Mhm.
actually can look in the mirror and say, you are, because you
Right.
love yourself.
And with that said, I know you're a wife and a mother, and there's a lot of obviously sacrifice that comes to caring for others in your family, even beyond those two groups. Do you think that that's been something for you to get to, like harder to get to more so this year? Is there something about this year that made it challenging? I know the world, there's lots of things that you can be focused on, particularly when you have two young kids. So what made that a focus as you move forward because of the environment we're in today?
I think that the world is really topsy-turvy. The world is
Yeah.
generally topsy-turvy, but this is a particularly topsy-turvy world. And there's so much out there that we can say, well, gosh, I feel sad. I don't know what to do. What does a
Sure.
leader do? But when you can come back and realize there's so much within ourselves to hold ourselves, there's a space of freedom there. And I feel like when I can come from this place, then everything feels more connected and feels like I can actually connect to you, Ruth. Like rather than
Right.
focus on, am I being articulate? I can say, like, am I sharing love? Am I like
Yes.
loving on myself? Am I being compassionate? All will be okay.
And do any of those things stand out from the myths of success? Because we were thinking about, there's several different stereotypes around what success looks like, right? And obviously, um, for ambitious and highly motivated people, and particularly women, you're constantly evaluating yourself against this kind of imaginary yardstick. So self-love obviously resonates, and particularly self-worth. But does that theme come up throughout your book often? Is it something that you try to educate, whether it's the readers at the end or one of your retentions, or just generally through all of your coaching work as well?
Absolutely. So the
Yeah.
very first myth in the myths of success is you are not worthy.
Mm,
And it's not like my mom sat me down and said, you're not worthy, right? It's not that. But when you grow up as a woman of color, especially, or people of color, a diverse leader, and you
yep.
look at what success looks like, what's the CEO look like? What does a military general look like? What does the priest look like? And there's a
Yes.
look, right? And it's usually
Yeah.
white male. And without knowing it, I, as a kid, thought, well, that's what I, need to aspire to be. I need to, if I can't be white and if I can't be male, let me act white and male. And even at
Mhm.
Kellogg, which I loved, love, love, love that school, we
Yeah.
never talked about, well, how do you lead as yourself authentically? And then know that that pinnacle of success, the picture of success, is actually you in the mirror. And that this is the like that's it, that's the key. Lead from
Right.
you, lead it from place of self-worth, which starts with self-love.
You hit on two key things I want to dive into your cultural upbringing, which I think is super important. And then now you're a veteran, but of course, the idea of what veterans look like. I've explored this theme recently, and Veterans Day was just a month ago now. And one of the things that we talk about is like, you don't know what the typical veteran looks like. So you make this picture, not you, but the euphemism you, and this idea of how do you honor them? How do you recognize them? Like, what made you, considering your background, be interested even in being in the Air Force to begin with and becoming a captain, considering the messages that you grew up with that were very different than the reality of what the typical Air Force captain looked like?
So it was surprising that I served in the Air Force at
Yeah.
all. It was my dad, who is US Navy, who said, I have an idea of what you can, your career or your next step after college. And
Sure.
when he told me, I laughed. I was like, seriously, Dad? That is a silly idea. I have to
Wow.
say that's been one of the best career advice that I ended up taking, because I learned the amazing leadership and my role models I had as bosses. And frankly, in leadership, it's
No,
hard
that's
to
huge.
find
Yeah.
really great
Yeah.
leaders. So
Definitely. Yeah.
I'm incredibly grateful that I had a models who I invited to my wedding. I mean, many, many years later.
Mm.
So much trust. So I mention this because when I was in the Air Force, I don't look like the typical blonde, blue-eyed, 6'2" white male. So
Sure.
I would have people come up to me because I served for a few years in Asia. So I'd be working with the Taiwanese Air Force. Imagine walking into a room, it's all male, right?
Yep.
And they look at you, and I'm wearing the uniform too, and they're confused. And so I had someone come up to me and say, are you really one American and two,
Uh-huh.
really American military? And I said, yes, yes. And they said, well, just to prove this is not a prank on us, because that's happened before, can you sing the Air Force anthem? And I thought they were kidding, but I ended up
Right.
singing the Air Force song, and they're like, I guess she's the real deal. But it's so rare. It's so very rare. And when you look at me, you think, well,
Yeah.
can she actually run? Can she do push-ups? Can she lead? And I can.
Right.
And I,
And you
well, it was
have.
scary. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And I can run in push-ups and like run even sometimes faster than people. But these stereotypes come, and while they're tough, I'm proud that I was able to rise above and say, just because you see me as a certain stereotype, I'm not that.
Right. Now, and I'd love to hear what your father saw in you early that ultimately said, ah, this is a great career move for you. Was it your athleticism, your leadership at home, the things that you were thinking about that made me or made him be like, this is the path for you? And were you unsure of your path, which is why he suggested this one? Because that ultimately connects to some of the things that you just talked about around how people make assumptions based on, even on body type, right? For
Mhm.
athleticism and some of the things that you are expected to do in the military.
I think my dad saw that I can perform in tough
Right.
situations, and that I had been in a lot of sports team and had done a lot of leadership. And I thought that I would pursue a corporate career. I mean, I thought I was going
Mm.
to be like a banker or some sort of like black suited person in New
Yeah.
York City. And the reality is, my dad, I think, saw early in me that I could, there's so much out there in the world
Hmm.
and so many different jobs. Why limit myself to this narrow view of success when he himself had benefited and served our country? Like, I am very, very
Right.
grateful that I was born in the United States, and my parents were able to immigrate from the Philippines. And I do have a lot to thank this country for. So that was a great way to serve and be proud of being American. So I'm very grateful. And I think that he saw that, even though at the time I rolled my eyes. I was like, seriously, Dad?
No, well, that's beautiful. And you highlighted another thing around just success and this theme of what we were, thinking about today in terms of what is that measure. So if self-love was this year, when you move into 2026 and what success looks like for you at this time of your life, what are the themes that you're thinking about? And, how does that resonate, particularly, in kind of a environment where there's so many different things that you could be measuring yourself against that ultimately you have to kind of filter down and make sure that it's fitting for where you are in this season of your life.
I mean, success to me, when we define it, is how you define it. So, Ruth, I
Right.
get to work with different coachees. And if you and I were to work together, I would say, well, how do you define it? And I would
Hmm.
actually check you if you said, I want to be an investment banker working in New York City on the 42nd
Right.
floor wearing, and I would say there's nothing wrong with that. That's a
Sure.
beautiful goal. But truly, what does a life well lived look like? This is how nerdy I am. I went to Stanford, and for my English paper, my freshman year, I pitched to this is going to be an academic paper, right? I pitched to my professor that I do a paper on answering the question, how do you live your wild and precious life? And my
Yes, the
professor was
design
just
your
like,
life.
how is that academic? I said, it's like chicken soup, but for college students, it doesn't seem like it's available. And we could do a lot of research as well as interviews. So I had to pitch her, and I pitched her hard, and she let me do it. And I have to say, I've been answering this question for many, many years. And then the most satisfied of people don't often follow that path, like the McKinsey, the Goldman
Yeah. Of
Sachs path. And I know a lot of people in these paths, and they're very
course. Yeah.
amazing people. But it tends to be the people who have followed their hearts, who've taken pivots, things that maybe you even look down on. Why would you go volunteer in that far flown off country? But it helped them discover a lot about themselves, purpose and community. And I love that. And so when we talk about success, it truly is whatever. And it's also not just your career, it's all of you,
Yes. Your
right? Like,
personal life. Yes, of
exactly.
course.
Like, how are you celebrating your birthday? As we're both doing that. How do we make sure that we're full people, not Ruth, I'm only a leader. That's all I am. That's all you got. I can actually bring my whole self.
And so for this designing your life theme, and there's so many categories, personal, professional, spiritual, health, all the things. Is there one method or way that you try to guide your coachees that would be good advice for people here today as they, start their end of year reflections and plan for the
So when I was in my 20s, I used to and I do this with coaching now, kind of a
Sure.
wheel of life where there's a career, and then
Hmm.
there's personal, like there's a health, there's spirituality. Like we would do all of those pieces and then set goals. Okay,
Okay.
run a marathon, get this promotion, learn this, like improve your Spanish. And so it would
Yep.
be like a really nice, and I would put it in an Excel sheet. It would be color coded. All of it would be in its place. And what I realized is that was effective, right? It's in the fridge, all of those things, the
Right.
bathroom mirror.
Visible.
Yes, very
Yep.
visible with the
Mhm.
daily habits. And what I realized is that as I've advanced in age or maybe been more wise, I have also learned to be more open and integrated. So, what that looks like, Ruth, is, for example, we're going to my values are community, which is family, friends,
Sure.
my community. It's also learning, so growth and adventure. And then the third one that I'd mentioned here is like my faith, my spirituality. And
Mhm.
so one of the things we're going to do next year as part of the bucket list of 2026 is to go to the Philippines and have this multi-generational trip where with my mom, my two kids, me, go with a few others and really learn about the Filipino our culture and our
Yeah.
spirituality there, and how and hopefully we'll get to build a nipa hut, which is an indigenous kind of home.
Mhm.
And it allows like all three of those things, right? I can have connection, but also faith, and have this adventure piece. And it feels like a way of not just checking boxes, but
Yeah.
actually holistically feeling like this is a meaningful way to share what's important with me with others.
And this flywheel concept I love because I know, at certain points the percentages of the flywheel ebb and flow based on each year, but it sounds like travel has been a consistent one for you. I know you just went on a trip with your brother, and that was very important in terms of, not just sibling bonding, but also exploring new parts of the world. And now you're doing this multi-generational trip with your mother and kids. What's the throughput there? Because I'm seeing now for women that solo travel is becoming a bigger trend, and it's something that I think is pretty interesting. It speaks to being confident and brave and comfortable connecting with people wherever you go, as opposed to leaning on the connections of the people that you're with. I'd love to hear your thoughts on just kind of this theme of travel as a consistent bucket list item within your life, no matter who people you're going on those trips with and what that means to you.
So travel is really important to me. I have to thank my mom back when we were in middle school and we
Sure,
had never really traveled. We went to the Philippines, but that was pretty much it. She was the one who came up with this idea of let's go backpacking in Europe. And we didn't really know what that meant. We actually went to
sure.
Target and I remember we bought like underwear we could wash in the sinks. And I was like, why are we doing that? She's like, you get four underwear. That's all you get for 3 weeks. And
Wow.
two shirts. And so we had everything in our little, like, it wasn't even a real backpack, like a backpacking backpack. It was like a
Sure.
school backpack. And the four of us landed in Paris. And the first thing my dad said was like, I'm hungry. Let's go to get Chinese food.
It's
And so
fair coming
I
from
share
you.
this because that was my introduction to
Sure.
travel, and it was beautiful. I learned a lot about how the world is so much bigger than America, and it got me
Right.
interested in seeing more of the world. I've actually because of it's been many years now, right?
Yeah.
And I really spend like as many resources I can, time as I can into travel. Traveled to over 100 countries now.
Wow.
And what I find really important about this is that it's not fancy. And in fact, you can keep that backpack analogy. I pack more underwear now, but
Yeah.
we really try. Actually, not a lot of it's in Europe. Most of it's in countries, Asia or Africa or Latin America that are not as resourced. And I think that's really important.
Sure.
One of the trips we went to last year was volunteering in Nicaragua, where the kids and I were lived in a homestay with literally
Sure.
dirt floors. And so when it would rain, we're like slapping through the mud, headed to the bathroom that didn't have, warm water or flushing toilets. And my kids were like, "Why are we here? Why are you
Mhm.
bringing me
Not my
here?"
usual
Yeah.
vacation, essentially. Right.
And I said, this is actually more what life is like for people. And it's different than home, but notice that they're still happy. It's not about what you own. It's not about, having all these achievements, although of course I want you to do well.
Yeah.
It's about, having what's most important to you. And you don't need a lot. So that's kind of the point of why I really value travel. I had adventure travel as well, but it's because it helps me remember that I love New York City, but it's also a
Yeah.
bubble and there's more to life than this.
No, that's true. And some themes came out of just even the lessons, whether your mom was giving them to you and now you're giving them to your kids, like being minimalist, being able to pack a few things and rely on them and not feel that you need to be over the top when you're visiting a new place, or just be organized and efficient so that you can move around quickly. But then also, showing your kids places that are different from where they grow up in New York, right? And understanding that the world does not live like what they're used to. I'm curious, particularly as a family of color going to a different country with other people of color. There's always so many interesting dynamics that I experience when traveling as a Black woman in the world. But it's funny because sometimes the stereotype of when you visit a developing country is that you are trying to do good and then leave and disappear. Like, are there themes and things that you think about in terms of having lasting impact around visiting a place and honoring that space culturally? And then how do you kind of continue that theme forward for your kids or for yourself when you come home?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I I really value trying to understand some of the context and culture. I want to, I don't want to like, I'm learned. Here I go. I
Right,
want to
right.
study the culture, but I want to be respectful and learn some of the context, some of the current events, particularly the people,
Sure.
and make sure that this is not, it's not a take, right? This is here I am to be served. So for example, last summer, I took my kids to Zimbabwe, where we volunteered with rhinos and elephants. And it was so magical to be that close to these amazing animals and then be able to learn from people in the community about how they were taking care of these animals. And I think that that's the key part here is like, how can we be of service too? How
Yeah.
can we be of value? How can we learn and not be these people to be catered to? And there's around that village there were kids, and
Yeah.
they were the kids of like the staff members. So my daughter went and they played soccer and they were so good. They were, I mean, I'm pretty sure they didn't have the kind of training that my kids,
Right.
got in New York City. Phenomenal soccer players that they were wearing, like they were playing barefoot. And there's
Yeah.
like animals with all the animal like dung everywhere, and they're like still playing hard. And my kids looked at that and they saw that they didn't have shoes. They're like, well, why should we be playing with shoes when they don't have shoes? And
Oh,
went out
wow.
there. And I think that's important, right? Is that
Yeah.
they're kids too. And we have a lot that we can offer. And Scarlett, I'm happy for her because she's like, what can we do to share? What can we do? Because we have a lot. I have a lot of clothes. What can I do to share? And I appreciate that kind of kind-heartedness because
Great.
I didn't grow up with a lot, and I know what it's like to want things that I'm not necessarily going to get. So I want the kids to know that they're very, very privileged to have what they have.
Right.
We're all privileged.
That's beautiful. And for your daughter to meet them where they are, I think says a lot about you too and what you've been able to teach her. And because you mentioned kind of that type of mindset, are there organizations and causes right now that stand out to you that you want to continue to support in New York and beyond, just based on this theme of where you can get involved, particularly because I know you serve you serve on nonprofit boards, you're teaching a class at NYU that speaks to social innovation and things of those spaces. And Lord knows we need social innovation within our own country as in addition to everywhere else. So I'm curious just what you kind of think about nonprofit community service and teaching courses like that, particularly in America today, which needs a lot of it.
So I thank you so much, Ruth, for that question because
You're
there's
welcome.
so much that we can do. I believe in
Great.
sharing our gifts, right? Whether your
Yeah.
gifts are monetary or they're a talent of yours. When we talk in coaching or when I'm teaching at NYU, it's about what gifts do you have. You can actually
Hmm.
like the more that you are authentic and you stick with who you are, Ruth, like you're so great at like speaking and connecting. And so thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your gift and like allowing other people to shine too with your gifts. So that's what I mean is what are
Sure.
your gifts, right? What are those? And then if you don't know, like let's lean in more and learn what those are. And
Hmm.
then second, how can we share those gifts to causes we care about? And they could be
Great.
anything. They could be to, I worked in schools. And so okay, if it's for students who are disadvantaged, that's great. If it's for a particular location, like in the Philippines, I'm doing work there, that's great. If it's for a particular topic, I get to work with people who are, for example, I'm going to shout out one organization, Red
Great.
Cloud Renewables, which is this organization in South Dakota that is helping Indigenous people get jobs through renewable work, solar panels, for example. And they're also helping
Yeah.
Indigenous communities with how can they be more independent, sustainable, environmentally like sound. And so
Yeah.
I love that because then they're supporting their communities, they're helping to provide work. And ways that I'm supporting is coaching, right? I have this
Yeah.
gift, and if we can go there and also participate or support in person, amazing. So, how can you do all of those things within whatever gifts and whatever resources you have?
I love that. Okay. That is very salient in the topic, and it speaks to one of the things around using your gifts and finding and being resourceful enough to apply them to that space. Because it's one thing to understand what you're good at, but sometimes the next step is where can I apply these gifts. And I find that today, there's several different distractions that obviously take up people's time, but like being well resourced to know where to apply your gifts or find opportunities to do so, are ways that I think people can be more creative. And I'm curious, like in your classes with NYU students or in your coaching, like what are the themes that are coming up in terms of how people are finding them? I know I thought about it in the context of the election. So whether it was, um, you know, voter literacy, financial literacy, something that I think about a lot, being in the financial district and understanding kind of the impact of District 1 and what does this mean for the city in general are things that come to my mind just based on where I live and work. But would love to hear what trends or themes that are coming up and resonating with students and coaches in terms of how do you apply the gifts you have to a space that needs it and how they went and found it.
Ruth, such good questions because this is actually something I do with my coaching. People come and say, I want a career switch, or it's not working
Yep.
for me, I want to change, or
Mm.
I don't feel like I'm fully actualized, or I have a lot of purpose in my
Yes.
job. And so you're getting to the crux of it, which is
Hmm.
how do you find meaning? And people find meaning in general through purpose, right? Have
Yep.
like reason for, I get up in the morning, there's a purpose to my life. Second, being able to know your gifts and then share those gifts. And then three, community, right? Those are three, but there's more. But if you
Yep.
go with those three, and how would you then stage them so that you could get to that role? So I'm going to trends that people get to.
Sure.
It often comes of like pain that we've experienced ourselves, right? So I'll pain for me. When I was a kid, I didn't go to really great schools. We lived in a low income community, and the low income communities, tend to have
Like less
schools that are
resources.
not great. Was getting bullied at school. And it wasn't until my mom, thank goodness for my mom, she said, I'm going to get you out of that school. And so she was the one who researched. That was before internet. So she's just calling and
Wow.
calling. We didn't have resources for people or family who had done this, gotten their kids a different education. And she somehow found a busing program that got my brother and me to this school, like what was, I think, an hour and 15 minutes away. It was really far. So we got up at like
Wow.
5 in the morning to go to school.
Mhm.
And we were like the only brown people at this school.
And
And I
where
say
was
that,
this?
yeah, this was back in San Diego. So
San
you
Diego.
think,
Okay.
oh, San Diego is so sunny. It is sunny, and also
Yeah.
it has neighborhoods that aren't, wealthy.
Sure.
And I mentioned this because, fast forward after the Air Force, after Kellogg, and I have spent a huge amount of my career in education, in schools, wanting to create not just safe schools, but schools that were really rigorous, that could get a
Hmm.
kid into Northwestern eventually, that they could
Right.
dream like that. Because at the where I was, a lot of my cousins, a lot of my neighbors, you know, they dropped out of school, joined gangs, got pregnant, you know, were enlisted in the military, work at fast food joints. And it was because of my mom, it was because of these schools that got me into a different trajectory. So I say this because it's sad to look back, but often there's some pain. It could be
No.
pain
Yeah.
from a childhood, or it could be pain even now where you feel sad when you're struggling with. I have a client who is really struggling because her mom was a single mom running a business and didn't have resources. And so they're barely making ends meet. And so she said, how can I do something about it? So we're now, getting this career where she's working in small business services for a
Oh,
community where,
yeah.
Spanish speaking. And so she's working on a mission. She's using her skills of bilingualism. She's able to like help this community in her local community and see
Sure.
actual relationships built. So this is what I mean of how do you take your gifts and then translate them into action in your local community.
Well, that's beautiful. And I have more small business resources for her just based on my work. So I will follow up on that. And that's another example of the power, I think, of sharing, whether it is a need or a gift that you have and being able to I guess go back and forth on being able to fulfill somebody's need or share your gift and vice versa. But you highlighted this point on pain and channeling it into purpose. And I'd love to hear how that is something that is like current to where you are today. Are there any pain points that you're thinking about, whether it is with your children, right? Whether it is with, balancing clients, student, like managing student curriculum, social innovation in a political climate, which is probably not supportive of some of the ideas and concepts or pulling away resources from them. I think like a lot of pain comes from the larger societal context that we're, dealing with today. And I'm curious how you navigate that, whether personally at home, in the classroom, or in conversations with clients, at a holistic view.
I feel like this is my job, my daily
Yeah.
job. I just got off a call with she's the second in a superintendent in a district, a school district.
Hmm.
She's second to the superintendent. And this call was about how do I manage just a lot of pain in
Sure.
relationships. They're a politically diverse community and they're serving you know, students of color. So how do you keep your momentum going for funds that are dwindling for this group of students? And so there's a lot of pain there. There's a lot of pain with relationships. What does it look like when there's values misalignment between her boss, who's the superintendent, and her? And how do we help you? How do we help ourselves?
Yeah.
How do we help this person through this? And I really believe, Ruth, we have to start with ourselves and making sure it's
Sure.
self-love and
Sure. That's
compassion.
rude.
I know you're always like, let's get to the tactical, let's make a project plan, let's go and apply those Kellogg skills. Yes, yes.
That's true.
Before that, come back and
Yeah.
like come back to self and like, I'm okay. I can do this. I love me. Like, it's going to be okay. Whew,
And breathe. That's
and breathe.
okay. I have a question that I think is relevant to that I want to make sure gets answered now, which is from, I actually can't see the name, but thanks for the question. It is, how can we stop the cycle of measuring success based on mainstream traditional values? And I think
Mm.
self-love kind of perfectly ties into that, whatever that looks like for you. But that is the question.
Ruth, I don't know what you looked at when you were looking at your magazines, when you're reading
Yeah.
about, your role models. But I think first and foremost, it's to look at what's shaping you now. Because you know
Mm,
that back in the past, oh, I watched a lot of, you know, blonde, blue-eyed. I read the Babysitters Club. So they were blonde, they were
yeah.
literally
Yeah.
blonde, blue-eyed twins who I wanted to look like. Obviously, I don't look like that. So every time I looked in the mirror, I was disappointed
Just
that I wasn't looking like the Jessica and Elizabeth, right? It was just that was so we've got to look at one, yes, we have a past that's crafted it, but two, who are we looking at now?
right.
And is that helpful? What's on when well, first of all, I have to admit this. I actually don't look a lot at social media
Social media. Mm,
and I love LinkedIn, but I'm very careful about that and the news
yeah.
because Kellogg, we know Ruth,
Hmm.
that shapes us. This is
True. No,
media
it
and
is. Yeah.
marketing, and there's real ways that
Messages.
people want,
Yeah.
yes, messages. You need to buy this product because you aren't skinny enough, tall enough, smart enough, blah, blah, blah enough. And
Yep.
when they keep just drilling into you, you're not enough, you're not enough, you buy it. If I
Yeah.
buy this, Ruth, I'm going to be smart enough. I'm going to be, preppy enough or blonde enough or whatever it is. So you got to shut it out. And
Right.
I literally, this is so Annalisa. I would,
Mhm.
when I was in the freeway, we'd be driving, there'd be a billboard when there were billboards. I would just like try not to see it. And my boyfriend, now husband at the time, would be like, that seriously?
Right.
So
Try to
I
avoid.
really try to block that, right? And then second, fill your life with what you want. And if you don't know, find models. So for me,
Right.
the models for me, I have to tell you about Tito Louis Faustino, who's passed away
Ooh.
since, but he was my mentor back at Stanford. He's Filipino, and
Mhm.
he would say, being Filipino is really important. And back then I was like, why are we talking about being Filipino? And he would say, being a mom is a beautiful gift. And I would say, why are you talking about being a mom? I'm asking you about business school, you know? Or he would say, you've done enough. You've already done enough and served enough. And I looked at him, I'm like, I'm in my 30s. I'm about to keep rising here. And obviously I didn't say that out loud, but he kept kind of grounding me back. He's asked me about faith. He asked me about, my ministry. And
Mm.
I come back to all these lessons that he was trying to teach me, they still sink in, that I'm enough, that being a mom is a beautiful thing if that's what you want to do, and that there's success looks like who he was. He had a corporate career, but spent a lot of his time mentoring people for free, at ministry and prisons, and loved being a grandfather and father and partner. So to me, that's more of a definition of success. And yes, I want to
Right.
have impact and do these things, but less about title and more about, am I filling really my soul and helping to like love others by loving me, right?
No, of course. And there's a lot here because LinkedIn, social media, avoiding physical ads in the subway or wherever you walk is like a very hard thing to do, right? Particularly highly stimulating environment like New York City is. And so when you talk about messages that, ones you want to keep in for yourself, ones you want to rebuff so that you're not, influenced, I still think that's like really hard to do, and it takes a strong mind and like consistent training, which speaks to who your background is in general from a highly disciplined career anyway, and serving in the military. And so for people who are not there yet, right, I'd love to hear what you think around like those filters. Because I know, for example, there's features on your phone where you can limit the amount of time that you spend on Instagram or any social media platform. Or boomers I know are stuck to cable television and can't seem to turn it off because it's a habit that is hard to break. For your kids, right? I'm sure you're managing what they get exposure to, but also you can't control that when they're not in front of you at school. And I'd just love to hear what you think about and any tips you have around filtering from a tough mindset perspective, because beyond that, it's like the world will continue to send you messages, but the real strength and gift that you would have from within is being able to like filter noise. So, how should people do that who aren't well versed at doing so yet?
Okay, so I'm gonna go. This is like a hardcore thing, but it's
Yeah.
honestly, it comes. I'm actually like I have an addictive personality. And what
Mm,
that means is if I love Cheetos, for example. Like if you
sure.
gave me a bag of Cheetos, it would be gone. That is
That's
what I
it.
love. And so
Great.
it's not healthy for me to have, and I would honestly, when I met my boyfriend at Kellogg, I would eat like
Hmm.
a bag for dinner. I mean, it was just like that was what I was doing.
Great.
Um, so how do I control that? Right? Just similar to social media. Do I say, okay, let me put the bag in front of me and have just three or five or half the bag? It just, for me, that's very difficult. And that's actually part of the ploy. Ruth, you and I know this, is that once we get you sucked in, right?
Great. The
Give you a
funnel. Yeah.
trial, a freebie, get you sucked into us. You're
Um,
not going to be able to stop. Like, when was it that once you pop one, you can't stop, whatever that name of the chips
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So you you don't want to, try not to get sucked in, and then find the times when you do tend to even just reach for it. I reach for Cheetos
Yeah.
when I'm stressed and I just need a pick me up. And really what I need is just to like lay down for a second and,
Yeah.
or just get a drink of water or something else salty. Like I really like salt, so get something different that's crunchy and salty. That's not a whole bag of Cheetos. So that's the first thing. Is it sounds extreme, but it's actually the easiest way to
Yeah.
just to control, because if you told me eat 9 Cheetos but not 10, I that's too hard.
Right.
um so that's the first thing. If you're going to though, then I'll use the Cheetos analogy. Then get the 100 calorie ones or the smaller calorie bags, and force yourself to go buy them at the bodega. So I do,
Physically do the
yes.
work. Yeah.
So
All
physically,
right.
I
Yeah.
only check social media honestly when I'm on, if you think about it, when I'm working out. I'm going to watch that show when I'm working out. So now it's a treat. You're doing
Counterbalance.
something you might like not want to do. So you think about it. Or if you can't do that, you time bound it. And I'm pulling stuff out from Atomic Habits about how you build habits to build your
Yeah.
life. So these are research backed ways to like keep yourself on to what you're to be intentional. A lot of these decisions that we try to get you to make, it's because you're like, we're unconscious, we're tired, we're just like going through the motions. We buy things, we eat things, we do things. And if we can get intentional about it and just like block it off or have a cutting point to saying to stopping, that really helps.
Great point. And along that lines, we got a question. Who or what is your favorite author or book that has helped you the most in your personal and professional life? And it sounds like Atomic Habits by James Clearly, I think, is an excellent one. But are there any others that stood out to you, whether you discovered this year or just from the past?
Okay, one that I've recently read, and I think I will read again, which is why I'm going to mention it, is
Oh.
one called Emotional Spirituality.
Hmm.
And I mention it because I would be, if you had talked to me a couple years ago, I would scoff at you if you said, Annalisa, in a couple years, you will be talking about faith. I would say,
Wow.
I don't, you got the wrong person. Just like my dad. Nope,
Hmm.
not going to the military. You are a silly person. And it has actually been really, really helpful for me in knowing that I'm not alone, that things happen for a reason, that there's a bigger plan. And emotional spirituality is a helpful book because I find this trend, even if to be secular, it's not even about it's yes, it's about faith, but it's actually
Sure.
about if we're not able to take care of what's inside, we end up projecting it outside. And a lot of leaders that I've worked with, I'd even say myself, when I was leading different schools, there was a lot of
Yeah.
work that I hadn't yet done healing myself. And so I was projecting it. If you had worked for me, I'd say, Ruth, you can do better. Ruth, why aren't you like doing more? I'm more efficient. So why aren't you more efficient? And let's keep
Right.
working. My whole life is work. And so the yours is too. All this stuff I'm projecting on you. Right. And
Yeah.
Ruth's just showing up to saying, what's going on? And that's actually a reflection back on me. I need to do some work to heal so that I can actually lead better and then bring people like Ruth along so that you
Sure.
can be your whole self. I'm not my whole self, so it's hard for you to be your whole self.
That's a word because projections, I think, are some of the probably the most difficult things that everybody navigates, whether from family members, friends, and everything else. So that stuck with me. And it's something that I think might connect to this other question, which is on what are your thoughts on tips for overcoming fear of visibility in your career and propelling forward? And I think, projections that come from how you are seen or fear that you are seen in XYZ way is kind of behind this question that was asked.
Okay. I just coached someone on this yesterday. She is,
Hmm.
I mean, she's applying for the top role in education in her state. Okay. So
Wow.
it's a big role.
Of
And
course.
I'm helping her coach her through it. And she said, no, I don't think I can put that on my resume. I don't think I can say that out loud because what will people think? Who will they think I am?
Hmm.
And I said, I hear you. And that makes
Right.
sense. That's actually a myth in the book is that you must be humble, right? Must be humble. Who me, Ruth? Why would I want to speak in this panel? Like who? I don't have anything to say. I don't want to take
Right.
space. I don't, and that's what we want to say because we've been trained to do that. And I said to her, my client, I said, listen, I get that. That's what we've been trained to say, especially as women.
Right.
And we say, no, thank you. That's not true. That's not my story because what I'm trying to do here it's not even about me. Like I want to share these lessons so that people can hopefully have less pain. And for
Yep.
her, I want her to be a leader. We want her to be a leader in her state because she will transform outcomes for kids. So whatever it takes to
Huge.
get
Yeah.
those roles. And yes, it means being visible. And yes, it means saying, I want to be CEO. I didn't even think that I could be CEO or want to be CEO until someone said to me, why not? You have all of the
Yeah.
qualifications. It never even happened at Kellogg, Ruth, where I saw myself as a CEO. They were mostly white speakers. I'm thinking through the lineup, most of them were like male, white. So I'm really glad that I had someone who told me, you should be CEO too. And it's so
Right.
sad that I needed someone to tell me that, which is why, as a coach, I talk about, do you want to be CEO? You could be. Why not? If
But
you really
you
want to have impact, let's do
right.
it. And yes, that means being visible. And yes, that means falling forward. Sometimes you're going to have to fail. That's true because it's part of growing up. If we just sit there and
That's
crawl,
true.
we're
Yeah.
just going to keep crawling. But kids toddlers, they've got to learn to walk and they will fall and they will then run and they will fall and they'll keep running faster and faster and faster. But you've got to like, it's part of the cycle and it's really welcome because you're growing and you're growing in impact.
I love that. And it's a reminder that sometimes it really only takes one person to say something to you for it to change kind of the outcome of how you see yourself. So, in that vein, Deborah, thanks for the question, Deborah. Hi. In the pursuit of personal success, how can we detach ourselves from outcomes to avoid disappointment?
Oh, that's a good question. If I
Mhm.
said to you, this webinar has to be perfect, where I'm able to be articulate, everything is
Yep.
perfect timing, and my survey results have 100% agreement that it was spectacular, right? That's a lot to expect. And
Right.
I'm probably feeling really nervous, even if as I say it, I'm like, oh my goodness, that is not happening here.
Right.
That's a lot. So rather than focus on the outcome, everyone's going to love me. This is going to go, I'm going to be so articulate and perfect.
Hmm.
Actually, pull it back to say, what's my intention here?
Hmm.
My intention here is to share what I can, trust myself, love myself, and trust that it's going to be okay. And whatever comes out of my mouth, it's going to be okay. And I'm going to prepare. I'm going to have some questions, think about the talking points, think about it
Yep.
beforehand, and then I'm going to show up and it's enough. And so when
That's
we do that, whatever happens, happens. It could be, I've had, survey results, it was okay. It didn't go as great as I hoped. It's fine because my intention was I present? Did I
Yep.
share that what as best as I could? And even can I show compassion to myself? That's enough.
That's beautiful. And this next question is too. This is from Eleni. Thank you, Eleni. How were you able to preserve how were you able to protect and preserve your softness, femininity, and individuality in a predominantly male environment, such as the Air Force, or other environments that have distinct homogeneous cultures different from what's inside of you? She's a woman of color in IT.
Ah, that's real. Because they could be
Hmm.
like, let's be our feminine
Hard.
selves and like
Yep.
fling around our hair. And then, I remember that when I got to boot camp and they said, your shorts are too short and your hair is too long, and you are, you're not moving fast enough. And that was like the first thing they said to me as they're yelling, right? It
Right.
was not a, hey, here's what you can do better. It was yelling. So yes, it's not like I can say, well, screw that. You can be yourself, right?
Right.
This is the environment we're in. That said, there's still things you can do. Understand your environment. And if you have to stay with that environment, you got to ask yourself, is that the right environment? But
There you go.
assuming
Yeah.
that there are no other choices, which I would push you on and say, actually, maybe there are different choices. You can do IT in a different industry. But anyway, but if it is this environment, there's other things you can do, which are find your people. So if Ruth and I worked together and it was this like cut through place and everyone was, very black and white and boxed up, I'd probably
Yep.
find Ruth first. She's so fashionable and I'd want to get advice from her. But she's fun and we would have our own our own relationship. And then
Yeah.
when you're back in the presentation room, we'd lock it up, right? And here we go. We're gonna do the thing. But then I'd have Ruth, my like work buddy, my work friend, and I can have like sisterhood there. Find
Yeah.
your people. And if you're not finding your people, again, going back to my first point, is it really the place for you? And the last thing I would say is get therapy, find a
Right.
coach, find ways that you can. I mean, this is
Yes.
assimilation, is what we're talking about, right? Code shifting. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
It's really incredible.
So if you're going to do it, then find ways to code shift so that you're still staying values aligned and you're protecting your energy.
That's beautiful. I love that, especially this point on code switching and code shifting in general, because sometimes you hear the rhetoric of, oh, you should be able to navigate in the environment that you're in that you may not fit the typical norm of and be as authentic as possible. And you know that won't make you successful. But your point around finding your people within that niche space, whether it is the opposite of who you are or, something new, I think is so good because when I think about my own experiences, I've done the same thing and that has been like phenomenal for me. So I love that point around being intentional around finding that one person, even if it's one who has that same type of value or mindset, so that you know how to go back and forth as needed. So that's beautiful. The last question that I see is the book that you mentioned, they need the author.
Yes, I will look for it
Yes,
as we talk.
because they are very curious in the questions. And I
Okay,
know
I
we're
have it. You ready?
perfect. Please.
Actually, shoot, I just lost it. Let me look it up as we go through. Anyway, keep
We can
going.
put in the follow-up later, but just
Okay.
make sure we track that. Um, oh, and another one's come in. What do you say to people who can't identify themselves beyond their career and professional title? I think you spoke to part of this earlier, but around, if your titles aren't everything to you in terms of your full identity, how do you move beyond that from a
Oh,
career
that's such a good
perspective?
one. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we wanted, look, I did it too. Nice to meet you, Ruth. I'm Annalisa. I'm the CEO of this. Great to
right.
meet you. Right. And now it's, well, I'm depending on it, like I'm a I'm a coach, but I also am a board member and I'm a
You
mom
have so
and
many
I
titles.
like a good
Right.
friend. Yeah. So I think it's um finding people who have a fuller concept of self.
Mm,
Usually those are people you hopefully have them in your friend community
yep.
and your maybe just even outside, like people who you admire who have full selves and spend time with them if you can, or follow them and see what they're up to.
Right.
Because because I used to, I mean, I couldn't even talk about being a mom. It was honestly like the black sheep thing. You're not committed to your work if you're also a mother. Now it's part of how I lead. I used to never talk about being Filipino. Obviously, I'm like Asian, right? But I would
Yeah.
never talk about that. Now I lead with I'm a proud Filipino. So find people and find models, find examples. Once you get into that world, when you read books, listen to, I have a Women of Color Rise podcast. I'm plugging that
Yeah.
because that's the reason I started it, is because we often don't see people who look like us who are top roles,
No, of
and there's
course.
a lot. So let's learn from them and realize they're not just their job. They're full people who make mistakes, who
Right.
get up and tell themselves it's okay, I can keep going. These are people we want to follow, whole people.
I love that. And because you said you have a podcast, you are also a TEDx speaker. So can you leave us with an insight from your TEDx talk that we should take as we wrap up, think about the end of 25 and apply it to 2026?
Okay, thanks for plugging. So TEDx was one of those bucket list things. I didn't really know how to do it, and people ask you to pay so much money for prep for it, which I don't agree with. And I will say that the topic of it was, how do you lead authentically? How do you lead powerfully? And the
Mm,
key is that you can just be you. And no, it doesn't mean again, in the military, you're going to wear short shorts, right? And just like grow your
right.
hair long and keep
You
it
can't
down.
break the
It,
mold.
yeah,
Yeah.
it means like, who are you? What are your gifts? Like,
Hmm.
who are you? What are your values? And then how can you find places and people who not just accept you, but appreciate you for being you? And then lean into that and lean into that and lean into that. That's the best gift that you can give, not just like the world, but also yourself.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. We have so many takeaways. I think two that stand out to me to wrap it up are this focus on self-love and purpose, but also being intentional about how you, one, think about the flywheel of who you are, and two, how does that connect to where you would go to apply those things, right? Because it's not enough just to know who you are and then not find the avenue to explore it. And that's where the purpose and the meaning of who you are comes through. And I really appreciate that reminder as I think about our both of our new years of lives. Happy early birthday. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the holiday season. So thank you so much again for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I also have that book. Can I just make a plug for it?
Oh, yes, please.
Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scazzaro. And
Thank you.
along with all the things I shared, also like understanding whether you call it God or the universe, but there's like
Mhm.
something bigger at play, I believe. And if we can, if that calls to you as well, it's been a beautiful space of growth, healing, acceptance, and peace. So I'll just share that as an opening or and also closing.
No, it's opening for the new year, closing for this one. It's perfect. Thank you so much for your time again. Thank you, everyone else, for attending today and your such thoughtful questions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.